Hi, it's Lisa, otherwise known as the Spiritual and Sassy Therapist. Um, I wanted to share, I guess, some of what it feels like I have been explaining and describing a lot with a lot of my clients, with my family, with my friends. I seem to be having a lot of the same conversation, and so I decided that I would share it even more openly in case it might help someone else as well. Um, so, what I want to talk about is how we are all right now experiencing um, grief with the COVID 19 pandemic that's going on. Grief coming from the place of our lives are not what they once were and how we might think that they should be, and we're all experiencing different levels of grief with that. It might look different on different people, and in any given moment, we might be in a different stage of grief, anger, sadness, depression, the whole thing. So I want to normalize that for a moment. And then I want to invite the thought of how we might be able to use what we are all going through to our advantage, which sounds weird because we're all struggling in different ways right now. But what I am coming to realize is that all of us carry with us our old story. Our old story comes from the beliefs that we learned early on in our lives. All of us obviously have a childhood. All of us have had an imperfect childhood in the sense of we all had stuff happen to us. And the stuff that happens to us early on forms these kind of deep down core beliefs in ourselves that we carry with us even when we become intelligent, rational adults. And these beliefs are often what shape how we're viewing the world, how we're viewing ourselves, and how we cope with things. So, all of the stress that we are all under right now with the COVID 19 stuff is intensifying all of the old beliefs that we're already carrying. And we know that it's intensifying because so many of us are having very deep emotional reactions when maybe normally we wouldn't react in that way. So, the way that we kind of know that our old stuff is showing up is I'm noticing kind of a bunch of different ways. So, one way is like intense dreams. How many of us are having like really weird, intense, detailed dreams, right? So that is a good indicator, like our brain, our subconscious, whatever, is processing a lot of stuff right now. So dreams are a big thing. How many of us are having really big feelings lately? Sometimes for what would seem like a very logical reason, like, we're watching the news or we're looking at social media, we're seeing something that we don't like. We're experiencing a lot of sadness, a lot of anger when we see that stuff. Sometimes, and part of this has happened with me too, I'm probably watching that stuff earlier in my day, and then seemingly out of nowhere, all of a sudden I have sadness or I have irritability or anger, and I'm kind of like, where in the world did that just come from? Well, it came from old story plus new stressor plus, watching social media and reading articles and stuff like that means later on down in my day, like all of a sudden I'm having irrational thoughts. They're not irrational. I'm having intense reactions. That's a better way to say it. The other way that I know it shows up for a lot of people, again, myself included, is how many people right now are having issues that are showing up in their body. More more stomach aches, more back aches, more muscle strains, that kind of thing. If it's showing up in your body, it's because it's already going on and you're not paying enough attention to that emotional stuff, and your body's going to show you that it's going on. So if we think that that stuff is going on, what do we do about it? So I wanted to kind of share some examples of some of the experiences that I've had and what I kind of do with it, because that's how I like to teach, and it's also how I like to learn. So it's why I love people like Brene Brown or Glennon Doyle, because that's how they teach as well. So I relate to Kyle Cease, another one. That's how I learn the best, so that's how I teach. So normally, though, I'm not teaching stuff that I'm experiencing so recently, but we're all in this together right now. So I wanted to share some examples of how it's shown up for me and what I have learned to do with it. So one of the most important things that I think all of us can do that we are probably not doing enough of is learning how to sit with our feelings and feeling them all the way. So I feel like that is not something that our society does a great job of encouraging and allowing, and there's only people now are starting to realize the value and importance of that. So the reason that we need to do that is because, it's kind of a, therapy cliche or whatever that says the only way out is through. So that means that the only way past these feelings is to go through them. The more that we try to avoid them and have resistance to feeling them, the longer they stay there and are more stubborn. So if we want to be free of them, we actually have to move into them and allow them and learn from them, and then they will move on. So what does that look like, and how do we do that? I tend to do it in a couple of different ways. So here's one example. So in our family, in our home, we have decided that my husband will be the designated grocery shopper, even though normally that had been sort of one of my jobs. So he goes and gets the groceries, brings them home. We go through this whole cleaning process to clean all of the groceries before they come into the house. And what I noticed was, on one of these days, I'm there cleaning the groceries in the garage, and I'm just irritable. I am just nitpicking the hell out of him for any imaginable reason. Literally, because he bought the same cereal that we had just finished. So, global pandemic, grateful to be able to get groceries, grateful to be able to clean groceries so that we can be healthy. And my mind wants to fixate on, you just bought the same Fruity Pebbles that we just finished. Are you kidding me? Literally is what I'm irritable with them about. I know enough to know that in the moment I'm irritated because of Fruity Pebbles, it's not really about Fruity Pebbles, right? So later on, I kind of am like, what was that about? What was going on? And I had to sit with that feeling and notice that frustration, that irritability, and start to think about it, what's the bigger picture here? Is it really about Fruity Pebbles? No, of course it's not. Never is. What is it about? I miss going to the grocery store, as crazy as that sounds, because I don't even actually like grocery shopping. I miss having the choice, even though this has been our choice to have our setup this way. I miss having the choice and the freedom to go grocery shopping and pick whatever cereal I want. I miss that freedom. I miss that choice. I'm pissed that I have to clean groceries, even though, again, that is our choice. But I'm mad that this is happening, that's requiring me to stand in a cold garage and clean groceries, right? Those are both grief. Those are both grief. I'm grieving the way things used to be, and I'm grieving the sacrifices that we're making right now. And those feelings are okay. It's maybe not a great idea that I'm, taking it out on my poor husband, but the feelings underneath them are okay. And I have to sit with those. And I have to then sit with, what does it feel like to have the circumstance going on that's kind of requiring me to be in my house. It's not anybody's fault, it's a circumstance, but I can still have feelings about the circumstance. What does that feel like? How does that relate back to part of my old story, right? How in my old story did I not feel like I had freedom to choose and freedom to move as I wanted to, right? So with that comes then compassion. Of course, Lisa, you're reacting that way based on this old story. How do I need to look at it differently now? I need to now remember, like, it is my choice. It's my choice to be cleaning groceries. It's my choice to have my husband do the grocery shopping right now, right? So I do have freedom of choice. It's just different than what it used to be. So with that compassion, it kind of helps to ease some of the internal chaos that is going on. So that's kind of like one example that I feel like I probably did more in my head. It's kind of hard to remember because I feel like that one was a couple weeks ago. Sometimes I have to be much more deliberate about it, and I have to sit down in meditation and kind of allow the stuff to come up. So in this type of meditation, I'm kind of adopting it from a transformational speaker named Kyle Cease, who talks about not meditating with the intent of having a clear, calm mind, but of kind of closing your eyes and allowing whatever needs to come up, whatever thoughts, whatever feelings, and noticing them and kind of looking deeper underneath them. So again, though, like, it feels kind of vague, and I'm like, what does that mean? What does that look like? So I'm going to share with you at my own personal vulnerability here of one of the kind of weird experiences that I had recently with this. Just to give you an idea of, like, this is what it could look like. It doesn't have to look like this, but just to, as a way to invite stuff to come up that needs to. So I don't remember what I dreamt. I had a dream that I just remember left me feeling very lonely, very disconnected. And it was the kind of dream, like, even after you wake up, like, you kind of are just carrying that feeling around with you all day. And I couldn't shake the feeling. I just felt sad, lonely, disconnected. Reminded me of pieces of my old story from childhood, adolescence, things like that. And then your mind starts coming up with why the old story is true, right? So at some point I realized, like, something's going on here and I need to sit with it. So I sat down, and where I meditate at, I have an air purifier in the room. And so I start off and I'm just trying to focus on the hum that my air purifier makes. So I listen to the hum, and of course, as I'm sure this happens with almost everybody else, our mind starts doing monkey mind stuff, right? So I'm trying to focus on the hum, and my mind darts off here and there. So what I have learned to do is to pay attention to where my mind darts off to when I'm trying to meditate, because there is a pattern. If I pay attention to the pattern, I can figure out what some of the deeper stuff is that's going on. So on this particular day, I have the dream about the loneliness and the disconnection, sit down to meditate, listening to the humming. My mind keeps darting off, and I just remember on that day, like I'm sitting there and I itch my nose, right? And so immediately my mind's like, oh my God, did you just itch your nose? Like, you're not supposed to touch your face during the pandemic. So my mind notices that. And then, again, like, it's so funny how when our mind starts to do a little trail thing, like the funny little links that it just makes. So I itch my nose. Oh my gosh, why are you doing that? It's a pandemic. And then it links to, my mind goes to a meme that I had seen recently that talked about like people in marching band, kids in marching band that have been preparing their whole life for not being able to itch their face when they need to, right? Because if you're in marching band, you know, you're supposed to all look unified and together and not itch your face. So then my weird monkey mind goes like, oh my gosh, what if you were in marching band and you really did have to itch your nose? Like, what would you do? And then, weird monkey mind says, what if you were in marching band and you had a tic disorder? And what if you forgot to take your medication that day? Like, random, weird, whatever. So then my mind is like, well, what if you didn't take your medication that day and you had a tic? What if everyone else that's also in the marching band knew that you had a tic? And what if they all decided to tic too? So that everyone would look the same, right? Wouldn't that be kind of like weird but kind of cool that like they all would be ticking, right? To just be unified. And at that thought, that unified feeling, everybody working together, like that, my mind went, oh my gosh, that's what I've been feeling. We're so disconnected right now as a society in so many ways. What has always been a deep core thing for me is feeling connected and unified. And I'm not feeling that. And like that, I started crying and sobbing. But as I was crying, what I did was I listened to whatever my body and my mind, my soul needed, right? So I think I probably was like hugging myself. And I kind of like to rock when I cry because that feels soothing to me. So I let my body do that because that's what it needed. As I was crying, part of what I have learned to say, again, if I'm trying to not resist the feelings, is to instead really embrace it and allow it and support it. So I say things in my head like, yes, you're sad right now. It's okay that you're sad. It's safe to be sad right now. It's safe. It's okay. Let yourself be sad. So I'm kind of like saying those things in my head. And then, I don't know, after a minute or I don't know how long, I feel the sadness kind of start to come down. And after it comes down, not before, because I have to get rid of some of this mucky stuff here before I can get to a deeper down thing, then I can ask. You can call upon whatever your belief system is. So God, the universe, source, a higher power, my inner knowing, like whatever you want to call it. After I release some of the muck, I basically call upon that and say, okay, what's the truth here? What's the truth that I wasn't able to see before? What do I really need to know? And then I listen. Because the answer will kind of come from within me, but it feels very peaceful and very wise. And what it said in this case was, yes, connection has always been important to you. That's a great thing. You need to focus and put your attention on the people that you have connection with. Stop focusing on the ones that feel disconnected. Put it on the ones that you do have connection with. And then, my mind kind of rattled off, like, who do I feel good with right now? So after that, later on that day, like, I reached out to, my two closest friends, because they're the ones I feel connected with, and I touched base with them, and it felt good and connecting and awesome, right? But that's an example of paying attention to where my mind went, observing it, and noticing the pattern of where my mind goes, and allowing my old story, my old belief system, allowing it to come up so that it can be healed, right? Does it mean that it's completely gone, that it's not ever going to pop up for me again? No, I think it's kind of more like peeling away layers of an onion. I peeled a big chunk of the onion away, right? So sometimes though, like when I sit down and I kind of go to do a meditation where I'm purposefully going to allow my feelings, sometimes it feels a little bit more challenging to like tune into an emotion. Because as with many of us, we get really good at distracting ourselves from emotions and feelings, and so it's harder to kind of pinpoint them or tune them in. So sometimes what I have to do is I sit there and I listen to the hum for a minute, and then I kind of, in my mind, just check in and I say, okay, what emotions are here right now? And it's weird, but like sometimes I'll be like, in my mind will be sadness. And I'll be like, really? I wasn't paying attention to that. I didn't know there was sadness there. Okay, let me go with that. And I will tune into it. Okay, so there's sadness here. Where do I notice sadness in my body? And I kind of just tune into my body. Or I will maybe kind of do like a little body scan in my head and feel like what feels off. So for most of us, if we check in with our body and there's an emotional thing going on, our chest, our stomach, shoulders, back, right? Those are like the common areas. So then I pay attention and I just tune in. Okay, so sadness is in my throat. Oh, I guess that's another area. Or it's in my stomach today, whatever. If I need to tune into it more to like really bring it to the surface, because that's again my goal, I will ask in my mind, if sadness were a picture, what picture would go with it right now? And I just pay attention to whatever pops in my mind. If sadness had a sound right now, what would it sound like? And again, I just listen to whatever pops in my mind without judging it or dismissing it or whatever. If sadness needed to say something, what would it need to say? And I listen to that. So all of those are kind of just to like kind of poke at it a little bit, because again, I'm trying, it feels so counterintuitive, but I'm trying to evoke it so that I can feel it and then allow it to be there. And again, saying the same sort of things in my head. I allow the sadness to be here. It's okay that sadness is here. I wrap it in love. I love it even though it's here, right? So it's very affirming and validating. If my body needs to do something, if it needs to cry, I know I've had a time before where the emotion that I had been tuning into was anger, and it had to do with boundaries. And my body wanted to like push the other person's stuff away, and so I let my arms and my hands do that, as weird as it looked, but my body needed to engage with it. But so again, after like tuning into it and allowing myself to feel it, allowing my body to do whatever my body wants to do, then I'm asking, okay, what's the bigger truth here? What do I really need to know? What do I really need to remember? And allowing that wisdom to come from wherever it's coming from. I don't have to label it. Allowing that wisdom to come in, because the wisdom that's coming in has to do with what did I not know back in my old story that I need to know and remember now. So again, it's like peeling away layers of an onion a lot of times, because our old stories are really ingrained, they're really big, they've had a lot of practice of being there. But with each layer of this onion, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So again, it's sort of like with the pandemic stuff going on, it's intensifying our emotions. It is really calling out our old story stuff. We can allow it to hurt us and devastate us and our families, or we can feel the ugly feels of it and move with it and through it, so that we come out the other side of this thing with some growth, with some healing that's been done. So I just wanted to leave, I guess, that all with you. Hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully you are all being very graceful and loving with yourself and with others, even when it's hard. A whole other video on that subject. But I send you much love and light, and joy on your journey. Peace out.